Greetings everyone. I welcome you all to a special lecture today on the topic commemorating 75 years of Indian independence. In this lecture, I shall be talking about the whole journey of the freedom struggle, and as we are narrating the various events, we would also be talking about some forgotten heroes. As the nation is celebrating freedom on the threshold of 75th year, Amrit Mahotsav is being organized. It is a series of events that are to be organized to commemorate the 75th anniversary of India's independence. Indeed, it's a special moment. So we must begin our discussion with some forgotten heroes, because as we talk about the freedom struggle or the entire movement for independence, we usually focus on the grand narrative of the movement that was unleashed by some prominent leaders. However, in that process, we forget the heroes, and we also forget the local leaders or those who were the backbone of the entire movement, that is the masses. So, one can talk about mother of Ram Prasad Bismil, Moolmati, who played a very important role and had very positive impact on the mind of Ram Prasad Bismil and shaped the way he fought and struggled for the nation. So one must take into account the family, also the contribution of the family who inspired the journeys of the freedom fighters. So just having a look at the image would apprise us of the important role that she played. Then another very important but hardly talked about leader was Khudiram Bose. Then another figure that one can talk about is Rani Gaidinliu. So as we are taking into account their contributions, we realize that India's freedom struggle cannot be described in a few words, and neither it can be relegated to the contribution of a few leaders only, belonging to the mainstream political parties. So Khudiram Bose, for example, was only 18 years and 8 months old when he was sentenced to death for attacking British officers in Bihar in 1908. As you can see in this visual, the simplicity and the confidence that one can see in this image is still alive. Then another very important figure, but hardly discussed in the pages of history, was Rani Abbakka Chauta, who was not only a brave lady, but she was also ruling her kingdom with an iron hand, and at the same time dealing with the challenges posed by the British. Then Lakshmi Sehgal was a revolutionary of the Indian independence movement, an officer of the Indian National Army, as well as a minister of women's affairs in the Azad Hind government. In fact, she is commonly referred to as Captain Lakshmi. Then another very important lady, Aruna Asaf Ali, was a freedom fighter and is widely remembered for hoisting the Congress flag at Bombay during the Quit India movement. She is also known as the Grand Old Lady of the independence movement. She worked in the worst of slums to offer help to the poor and the exploited. Then another very important figure was Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, who was the first woman to run for a legislative seat in India and also the first Indian woman to be arrested by the British regime. She played a very important role as a social reformer and in fact brought back handicrafts, theatres and handlooms to help in uplifting the socio-economic standard of the poor artisans as well as women. Then one can also recollect Garimella Satyanarayana, who was an inspiration for the people of Andhra, because as a very influential writer, he used his skill to write poems and songs and hence motivated people to join the movement against the British. So all these people were probably not associated with Indian National Congress, but then the roles that they played were diverse and very important. Then another example was Velu Nachiniar. She was the first queen to wage a war against the British and gave them a good run for their resources. She in fact opposed the British rule even before the Sepoy Mutiny. So generally we consider 1857 to be the first war of independence, though it was rubbished as the Sepoy Mutiny by colonial historians. However, we have so many examples of struggles that were waged even before this war of independence, and Velu Nachiyar is one such example. Then one can also talk about Matangini Hazara, who was a famous Gandhian leader and a humanitarian who was shot dead holding the flag of freedom in her hand by the British. She was in fact affectionately described as Gandhi Buri. Bengali, which the term meant old lady in Bengali. So these were some of the lesser known. It is not to say that this was an exhaustive list. There are so many names which still lie buried in the pages of history, and it is for everyone, all those interested in understanding the nuances of our freedom movement as well as attempting to rewrite history, to reinterpret history, to look at a number of local leaders and then also to unearth their past and to bring them to the forefront so that everyone else also knows them. Now briefly one can talk about the causes of Indian nationalism, because when we are talking about the freedom movement, then obviously it was a response to the feelings of nationalism that were emerging, that had started emerging by the end of 19th century, and formation of Indian National Congress in 1885 was in fact a culmination of all the developments that had been going on from 1850s, 1860s onwards, as a number of associations were formed in Bombay, Madras, Calcutta of educated Indians, and how these educated Indians were not only mobilizing in name of caste or community, but they had a much wider horizon in their mind, and that was the entire country. So there was an attempt to have a pan-Indian organization which ultimately bore fruit in 1885 with the formation of Indian National Congress. So if we quickly glance through what were the causes that were responsible for emergence of nationalism, then of course there were many. For example, a discontentment with the British rule played a very important role in unifying the diverse castes, communities, classes, genders, and of course the issue of leadership was also very important. With the onset of modern education, English language, there was a common medium of instruction as well as communication, and soon all the important leaders, they kind of raised the issue of rights for educated Indians in the beginning and later on for the masses. Then also the new print culture played a very important role in encouraging in awareness, in also bringing about a change in the thought process. So the spreading print culture, the magazines, the journals, they continue to play a very important role in unifying Indians across time and space. As a result of this, a number of nationalist organizations emerged, which played both positive as well as negative role in creating a kind of identity towards their own demand, towards the demands for their own community, but also with a pan-Indian narrative in mind. So therefore, if we talk about the discontentment with British rule, it was clearly social, political, economic and cultural discontentment, and this in a way paved the way for a unified struggle in which it was not only the educated leaders who were participating or who were leading the movement. Rather, there were artisans, there were peasants, there were women who were definitely providing a striking force, and the mass mobilization went a long way in channelizing, in helping the leaders channelize the energy of common Indians. So one can of course go back to even pre-1857 period and the series of revolts and uprisings that played a very important role in making Britishers realize that they could not go their own way all the time, and this kind of resulted in a large number of policies that were revised from time to time. Now coming to the First World War and what was the impact of First World War and how politics evolved from 1914 onwards needs some kind of a discussion on the Khilafat as well as the non-cooperation movement. So the First World War in 1914, it had very negative implications on the lives of Indians. There was an increase in defense expenditure that led to an increase in taxes on Indians. Income taxes were introduced, custom duties were revised, they were increased, and also there were crop failures in several parts of India, resulting in a dire shortage of food at a time when the food products, the food grains, etc., were being exported in order to feed the British army who were fighting on the war front. So as a result, the hardship for the common people was increasing. People hoped that this hardship would come to an end once the war was over. However, it did not happen, and the situation was further aggravated due to crop failure. So it was in this background that Mahatma Gandhi came back to India in 1915 after introducing the concept of satyagraha in South Africa. He organized several satyagrahas in India. For example, Champaran Satyagraha in 1916, then there was Kheda Satyagraha, Ahmedabad Mill Strike in 1918. And finally, a very important development came in the form of Rowlatt Act. This particular act authorized the British officers to imprison any Indian political leader for 2 years without any trial. And Mahatma Gandhi came out against Rowlatt Satyagraha in 1919. Because this was definitely a measure to curtail whatever little rights Indians had. As a result, shops were closed down, a number of rallies were organized, and strikes took place. Now, to crush the movement, British government imposed martial law. and General Dyer, who took command, and when 13th April 1919, a Baisakhi fair was organized in Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. So it was then that General Dyer ordered to close all the exit gates and opened fire on the crowd, as a result of which hundreds of Indians died. So this was kind of shaking the conscience of Indians as to what kind of rulers they had, how they had reduced these Indians to merely, bodies who could be fired at will. So from 1920 to 1922, we can talk about the first Satyagraha in India, which was started under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. The Amritsar massacre of 1919 played a very important role in this, and in 1920s, with Mahatma Gandhi's first Satyagraha, which was designed to make the British rule in India non-functional through a complete non-violent boycott. As a result, several Indians were jailed, and however, as violence erupted in 1921 in Chauri Chaura, the movement was abruptly called off in February 1922. And it was then that Mahatma Gandhi realized that there was a need to fully equip Indians with the techniques of mass struggle, and hence he realized that probably the movement was not right for continuing the movement, because there were chances that it would become a violent struggle in several parts of the country. Now, this was also a time when a new party was emerging in the form of the Swaraj Party. There were several political leaders who suggested the idea of fighting the Britishers from within the legislative council, and not only kind of limiting their struggle to the to satyagraha or to non-violent struggle. So C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru formed Swaraj Party in 1922, and there were leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose who also wanted a more radical agitation. So we see that there was a different strand that was emerging with a different thought process altogether. Now, the next major movement that we can talk of, if we are talking about the mainstream political struggle, was the civil disobedience movement, and this again can be explained with reference to so many events that were unfolding. For example, Simon Commission. Now, the Simon Commission had been appointed with the view to introduce more constitutional changes. However, since this was an all-British commission, so therefore Indians kind of decided to boycott it, and the Simon Commission that was appointed in 1927 to suggest further constitutional reforms failed to incorporate Indians in their organization. Now, this commission consisted of 7 members, with the chairman being John Simon, and Indians boycotted as there were no Indian members in it. Now, the first priority of Indians by this time under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi had become some kind of a Swaraj, and when this commission arrived in 1928, it was met with demonstration with banners. Now, this was also the period of Great Depression that was going on in the Western world, in America, and the Great Depression had deep impact on the agricultural and industrial goods production also. As a result, poverty greatly increased due to high taxes, especially by 1930. So, overall, you can say that the condition was ripe for the second round of Satyagraha, which came in the form of Salt March. So, Mahatma Gandhi believed that salt could be a very powerful symbol to unite the whole nation, and most of the people, including the Britishers, they kind of mocked at the idea that how could making salt challenge the British rule or British regime. So, abolition of the salt tax was among many demands that were raised by Gandhiji through a letter to Viceroy Irwin. The Salt March or Dandi March was started by Mahatma Gandhi on 12th March 1930. He was accompanied by 78 volunteers who walked for 24 days to cover a distance of 240 miles from Sabarmati to Dandi. And finally, on 6th April 1930, Gandhiji ceremonially violated the law by taking a fistful of salt in his hands. And the Salt March definitely marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. This was a movement in which people participated in large numbers. They demonstrated in front of government salt factories. Foreign cloth was boycotted. Peasants refused to pay revenue. Village officials also resigned, and even tribals, they kind of participated in this movement by violating the forest laws. Now, with so much of opposition that was being generated, what was the response of Britishers? The colonial government began to arrest the Congress leaders. People began to attack the symbols of British rule, such as the police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, as well as railway stations. And around 1 lakh people were arrested. So, with so much happening and with so much of opposition that was emerging from time to time, one can now ask a question as to what was the role of masses in this entire struggle, or was it only the leaders who were calling the shots? So, here I would like to make an observation that obviously with the coming of Mahatma Gandhi, the movement became a mass movement, and the strength of masses, the participation of masses, and especially women from 1920s onwards became quite noteworthy. So, women came out of their homes, they participated in the movement, and they also got an opportunity to show their worth, because till now it was the whatever movement or whatever form the opposition to the British regime was taking in the form of a patriarchal narrative. But again, it is not to say that things changed overnight or that the masses got their due, because while the Congress leadership appropriated the striking force of the masses, the striking force of women, however, these sections, whether they were peasants or artisans or workers or laborers or women, they got very less in return, and their issues were not really highlighted. Thank you.